I thought I was just going to the bank to deposit a check, a simple trip with my son who insisted he had to protect me. He kept telling me the cash in my purse was fake, a part of his elaborate act to convince me I was losing my mind. But he had no idea that what I was about to slip to the bank manager was not the check he expected, but a note that exposed his true intentions. It wasn't just my money that was fake, it was everything he claimed to be. My son, Michael, always had this knack for turning a perfectly pleasant moment into a potential disaster. It was a skill honed over 30-odd years, a talent as reliable as the setting sun. Today, it was a beautiful, crisp fall morning, the kind where the air smells of roasted chestnuts and possibility. I was at the local market, the one I've been frequenting since Michael was a boy and would cling to my skirt like a tiny, determined koala. I was in the checkout line behind a young couple, clearly just starting out. They had a small bouquet of sunflowers, a jug of milk, and a bag of apples, the sort of purchases that scream young love and limited funds. As the cashier scanned their items, the young man's face went white. He tried his card again, then again, each electronic denial a fresh dose of humiliation. He muttered something about his paycheck not clearing. The girl started to tear up. It was a simple, universal moment of modern panic. Without a second thought, I stepped forward. "Don't you worry about that, honey," I said, pulling out my wallet. I slid a $20 bill across the counter. The cashier, a sweet girl named Maria, who'd watched me shop for decades, looked at me with a soft, knowing smile. The young couple looked like I'd just handed them the keys to a kingdom. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll pay you back," the young man stammered, his cheeks burning red. I just waved a hand dismissively. "Pay it forward when you can," I said, and meant it. He promised he would, and the grateful look on the young woman's face was the best $20 I'd ever spent. It felt good, a small ripple of kindness in an otherwise chaotic world. It was a reminder that I was still capable of good, that my heart hadn't hardened with age, despite all the world had thrown at it. I was a good woman, and in that moment I felt a deep, warm sense of peace. That peace, as it turned out, was about to be shattered. My phone buzzed as I walked out, the familiar grating ringtone I'd assigned to Michael. I braced. "Mom, what are you doing?" he demanded without a greeting. I sighed, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear as I wrestled with my reusable shopping bag. "I'm on my way home, Michael. Just left the market." He grunted, a sound that conveyed a lifetime of paternalistic disapproval. "I saw your post on social media, the one about the young couple. You just handed them a $20 bill? Mom, do you have any idea how much funny money is out there these days?" My brow furrowed. I had no idea what he was talking about. What post? I rarely used social media, and when I did, it was usually to share pictures of my prized rose bushes. I knew my daughter-in-law, Jessica, had access to my account. "What post?" I asked, my voice a little colder now. "She posted it," he said, as if that explained everything. "She thought it was a sweet gesture, but we're all so worried about you, Mom. What if that money was counterfeit? You can't just be handing out bills like that. You don't know where they've been." His voice was laced with a patronizing, condescending tone that made me want to scream. He was trying to frame a kind act as a sign of my naivete, my frailty. I was a 62-year-old woman, a widow who had managed her own affairs for over a decade. I didn't need to be lectured on the dangers of counterfeit money. I had bought and sold 2 houses, run my own small business, and raised a son who now had the audacity to question my judgment. I bit my tongue. I knew if I responded with the righteous fury I felt, it would only prove his point, at least in his twisted logic. He would call me emotional, unstable, not thinking clearly. So I simply said, "Michael, it was a 20. I'm sure it's fine. I'm not a child." His laugh was a dry, humorless rattle. "We just want to make sure you're okay, Mom. Things are getting more complicated now. We're hearing a lot of stories about elderly people getting taken advantage of. It's for your own good." That phrase, "for your own good," was the verbal equivalent of a brick wall. It was the closing argument in every argument we'd had since his father passed. It was the excuse for every infringement on my independence, every condescending piece of advice. He was building his case, one infuriating conversation at a time. The $20 bill wasn't a random act of kindness in his mind. It was a symptom of a larger problem. The problem, of course, was me. I hung up. My good mood completely evaporated. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool autumn air. It was the chill of a person being slowly, methodically stripped of their autonomy, their dignity. The $20 bill was just the beginning. I knew with an awful certainty that this wasn't about my safety. It was about control. It was about him, Michael, deciding he knew better than I did, and that my life and everything in it was his to manage now. He wanted to take my freedom, $1, one decision, one phone call at a time. He and Jessica were building a narrative about my supposed incompetence, and I was the unsuspecting protagonist in their little drama. Well, I wasn't going to stand for it. But I had to be smart. I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment. And as that thought crossed my mind, another one followed it. If you want to see how this story unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. It's only going to get crazier from here. The moment I walked through my front door, I knew something was wrong. The air was heavy, and the scent of Jessica's expensive perfume hung in the air, a cloying floral smell that always gave me a headache. Jessica was a woman who believed in making an entrance and leaving a lasting impression, even if it was just a lingering scent that made your eyes water. I dropped my grocery bags on the kitchen island with a thud. My purse, which I had left on the hall table, was ajar. It was a minor detail, but one that sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I am meticulous about my belongings. I always zip my purse closed, always. I went to the dining room and saw Michael and Jessica sitting at the table, a tableau of faux concern. Michael was hunched over, his hands clasped on the table, while Jessica sat ramrod straight, a practiced look of worry on her face. They looked less like concerned family and more like a jury deliberating on my fate. "Mom, we need to talk," Michael said, his voice low and serious. I just stared at them for a moment. "What are you two doing here?" I asked, my voice flat. "We were just so worried after that phone call," Jessica chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It just doesn't make sense for you to be handing out cash like that, not with all the scams out there." There it was again, the condescending pity. I walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and grabbed a bottle of water. I unscrewed the cap and took a slow, deliberate sip. I needed a moment to compose myself, to stop the rage from bubbling over. They were sitting in my house, uninvited, passing judgment on me and rifling through my belongings. "Michael, what did you do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me with what he probably thought was an innocent expression. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay, Mom. And I found something that, well, it just confirms our worst fears." He reached into his pocket and pulled out my wallet, the one he had seen me put back in my purse. My heart rate sped up. He held it in his hand like a piece of evidence. "I was worried after you gave that young couple money. I wanted to see if you had more of that counterfeit money." Counterfeit. The word sounded so absurd coming out of his mouth, a lie he was trying to make real through repetition. "Michael, give me my wallet back," I said, my voice rising. He ignored me. He slowly pulled out the bills from the money clip inside. "Look at this, Mom. It's all fake. The texture is all wrong. Look at the printing. It's all blurred." He held up a few bills, all 20s. My stomach dropped. I had gotten that money from the ATM just last week. It was perfectly good money. But he was holding it, turning it over, pointing out flaws that weren't there. He was trying to gaslight me, to make me doubt my own sanity in my own eyes. I felt a wave of nausea. I'd seen his father do this to me back when he wanted to control my social life. It was a playbook I knew well, and it was being used against me by my own son. "Michael, that is not fake money, Michael," I said, my voice trembling now with a mix of fear and anger. "That's money I got from the bank. It's perfectly fine." Jessica, the dutiful accomplice, stood up and put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I recoiled, as if she had branded me.
Honey, we know it's hard to accept, but you have to understand, we're just trying to help you. We've noticed a few things lately. You left the stove on a few times. You forgot about our dinner date last week. The list was a carefully curated litany of minor mistakes anyone could make, now being presented as a sign of my complete mental unraveling. They were building their case, piece by piece, right in my own dining room. Michael, I did not forget about that dinner date, Jessica. You changed the time at the last minute. I wrote it down. Jessica sighed theatrically and looked at Michael with a sad, empathetic expression, as if to say, "See? It's worse than we thought." My son took my hands in his grip a little too tight. "Mom, we're going to help you. We're going to get you a new bank account, one we can help you manage. It's safer this way. We're just going to take care of everything for you." And that's when I saw it, the glint in his eyes. It wasn't love or concern, it was hunger. The hunger of a predator seeing a vulnerable prey. My heart pounded against my ribs. I knew in that moment that this wasn't about funny money. It was about my money. All of it. And I was going to have to fight for it. I was going to have to fight for my life. I felt a sudden, cold sense of clarity. They thought I was a fragile old woman, a clueless mark. They had no idea I was a fortress, and they had just declared war. What they didn't know was that I had a plan, a quiet, brilliant plan, that was already in motion. They wouldn't see it coming.
The following week was a masterclass in psychological warfare, a slow, methodical erosion of my independence. Michael and Jessica had taken on the role of my self-appointed guardians, a tag team of condescending helpfulness that made my skin crawl. It was like living in a reality show where I was the main character and everyone else was a highly paid actor performing for a non-existent audience. Michael would call me 3 times a day, demanding to know where I was, what I was doing, and if I had interacted with any suspicious people. He would ask me to repeat a story I had just told him, his tone full of feigned patience, as if he were testing my memory. Jessica would drop by unannounced, bringing me pre-made dinners and commenting on the state of my house. "Oh, Mom, don't you worry about this pile of mail," she'd say, sweeping it up and depositing it in a pile on the kitchen counter for her to organize later. The family lunch a few days later was the crowning achievement of their campaign. They had invited my sister, my niece, and my brother-in-law to a restaurant I loved, a charming little Italian place with checkered tablecloths and the best ravioli in the state. I was genuinely looking forward to it. It was a rare chance to see my family without the suffocating presence of Michael and Jessica. Or so I thought. When I arrived, they were all already there, sitting around a large, round table. As I took my seat, I saw the sad, concerned looks on their faces. The air was thick with a pity so heavy you could cut it with a knife. Michael gave me a look that said, "Act normal, Mom. We've told them everything." The conversation started innocently enough with my sister asking me about my garden. I was in the middle of a passionate explanation about my prize-winning hydrangeas when Jessica interrupted, her voice a little too loud and a little too sweet. "Mom, honey, did you tell Auntie Carol about the new scam you ran into? The one with the banknotes?" The entire table went silent. All eyes were on me. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. It was a carefully planned ambush designed to humiliate me and prove their narrative in front of the family. I looked at Michael, who just gave me a small, sympathetic nod, as if to say, "Don't worry, I've got this." I took a deep breath. "It wasn't a scam, Jessica," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael thought some of the bills in my wallet were counterfeit, but they were perfectly good, from the bank." My niece, bless her heart, piped up, "But why would Michael think that, Auntie? Did someone give you a lot of fake money?" The questions came from all sides, a barrage of well-intentioned but deeply invasive inquiries. Michael launched into his story, painting a picture of a frail, confused old woman who is being taken advantage of by a cruel and heartless world.
He spoke of my financial confusion, my poor memory, and my unstable emotional state. He even mentioned my forgetting their dinner date, conveniently omitting the fact that they were the ones who had changed the time. Jessica, the perfect sidekick, added her own subtle, damning details. "We just want to make sure she's safe," she said, her voice trembling slightly with manufactured emotion. "The world is a scary place for someone who's, a little forgetful." I wanted to stand up and scream at them, to tell the whole table that they were lying, that this was all a sick game to take my money. But I knew it would be a losing battle. They had already planted the seeds of doubt. My family, who had always loved and respected me, was now looking at me with a mix of pity and concern. It was a new kind of loneliness, the loneliness of being in a room full of people who think you're losing your mind. As I looked around the table, I could see them buying into the story. It was a horrible feeling.
After the disastrous family lunch, the situation escalated further. Michael, emboldened by the family's sympathy, decided to formalize his control over my life. A few days later, he came over with a stack of papers and what he called a financial plan. The document outlined his proposal. He would manage all my finances, pay my bills, and give me a weekly allowance. He would also be the sole contact for my bank, my utility companies, and any other accounts. He presented it as an act of selfless love, a way to take the burden off my shoulders. I stared at him, my mind numb with disbelief. He was a grown man, and he was trying to put me on an allowance. "Michael, I'm not a child," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm not signing this." His face hardened. "Mom, you need to be reasonable. We've seen the signs. The fake money, the memory lapses. We can't just ignore this. It's for your own good. We're worried about you." I shook my head, my mind racing. I couldn't just sign away my life. I couldn't let him win. I had to do something. I had to show him that I was still in control, even if I wasn't. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, my back ramrod straight. "I am not signing anything, Michael. I am perfectly capable of handling my own finances." He didn't budge. He just stood there, his face a mask of disappointment. "Mom, this isn't a negotiation. We're doing this because we have to. You're not being safe." The word safe was now his weapon of choice, the trump card he played every time I tried to assert myself. The argument went on for what felt like hours, a vicious cycle of his condescending concerns and my impotent rage. Finally, defeated and exhausted, I said, "Fine, I'll go with you to the bank to talk to the manager. He knows me. He'll tell you I'm perfectly fine." A flicker of something crossed Michael's face. Panic? No, not quite. It was more like a flash of triumph. It was a look that said, "You fool, you just walked right into my trap." We went to the bank the next day. It was a Friday, and the place was busy. Mr. Thompson, the bank manager, was a kind, older gentleman who I had known for years. He had helped me set up my accounts after my husband passed. He greeted me with a warm smile, but when he saw Michael, his smile faltered a little. "Hello, Mrs. Harrison. And Michael, what can I do for you today?" I started to explain, but Michael cut me off. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for seeing us. My mother and I just need to clarify a few things with her accounts. We're concerned about her financial stability." He then proceeded to give Mr. Thompson a carefully rehearsed speech filled with the same lies he had told the family. He spoke of my confusion and my forgetfulness. He spoke of the counterfeit money I had supposedly received. Mr. Thompson listened patiently, his face a neutral mask, but I could see his eyes darting from Michael to me, a silent question in his gaze. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Michael had gotten to him first. He had painted a picture of me as mentally unstable, and Mr. Thompson, who had always seen me as a capable, independent woman, was now looking at me with the same pity and concern that my family had shown. He had planted the seed of doubt, and it was already taking root. I was alone, standing in the bank, My son trying to steal my life from me, and the one person who I thought could help me was already on his side. It felt like the walls were closing in and there was nowhere left to run. But I had to run. I had to find a way out. This was a war, and the first battle was just lost. But the war was far from over. What happened next would change everything. You won't want to miss a single second. The trip to the bank was a turning point. It wasn't just a confrontation, it was a revelation. Michael had spent weeks building this elaborate house of cards, this twisted narrative of my mental decline, and he had planted it right in the mind of the one man I trusted most with my finances. The moment I saw Mr. Thompson's expression shift from genuine warmth to professional concern, I knew. Michael had won this round. He had persuaded the man. He had poisoned the well. So when Mr. Thompson suggested that Michael become a co-signer on my main account just for safety, my heart sank. It was the moment I realized they weren't just taking my money, they were taking my credibility. My word was no longer my own. The days that followed were a suffocating routine of veiled condescension. Michael now, with official bank approval, had taken full control. My debit card was gone, replaced with a small weekly envelope of cash. This way, you can't accidentally fall for a scam or misplace your card, he'd explain, his voice as smooth as a polished stone. Every bill that arrived at my house was intercepted by him. He'd sit at my kitchen table, going through my mail, humming to himself, acting like he was doing a heroic service. It was a bizarre, humiliating spectacle. I felt like a patient in a long-term care facility, stripped of all my agency. I would watch him and I would think, "You have no idea what you're doing, do you? You think you're so clever, so in control." I began my small, quiet acts of defiance. I started hiding a few dollars here and there, a 5 in an old jewelry box, a 10 tucked into a book, a couple of ones under the sofa cushion. It was a ridiculous game, but it gave me a sense of control, a small flicker of rebellion in the darkness. I was a squirrel hoarding nuts for the winter, a woman with a secret. They thought they had me in a cage, but they didn't realize I was chipping away at the bars. One afternoon, while Michael was on a call in the other room, I went to my desk and took out an old, faded notebook. It was a ledger from my late husband's business, filled with his spidery handwriting. I began to write. I wrote down every interaction, every phone call, every condescending comment. I wrote about the fake money, the family lunch, and the bank meeting. I wrote with a fury I hadn't felt in years, a righteous anger that fueled my pen. This was my new plan, my own secret diary, my own evidence, my own truth. I was creating a document that would tell the real story, not the one Michael was trying to spin. I knew I couldn't beat him in a verbal fight. He was too good at it. His lies were too believable, his narrative too well rehearsed. But I could beat him with facts. I could beat him with details. I was building my case, and it was all in this little notebook. I would write in it every day, every single thing. He would never think to look for it. It was too mundane. It was my secret weapon, my quiet rebellion against his manufactured reality. My mental state was a strange mix of profound despair and fierce determination. The despair was a constant companion, a heavy cloak of loneliness. My sister called me a few days after the lunch, her voice full of pity. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said. "We had no idea." She had finally seen the truth. Not the lie Michael had been selling, but the lie he had been living. I was a survivor, not a victim. He had been so sure of himself, so arrogant in his lies. He thought he was playing a game of chess, but he didn't realize I was playing a game of poker, and I had a royal flush. But beneath the despair was a core of pure, unadulterated resolve. Every time Michael called me honey in that cloying, patronizing voice, every time Jessica tidied up my mail like I was a toddler, my resolve grew stronger.
I was not some fragile old woman. I was a fighter, a survivor. I had buried a husband, raised a son, and built a good life for myself. I wasn't going to let him take it away from me. I was going to fight. I just needed the right weapon. The idea had been simmering in the back of my mind since the day he had pulled out my wallet and called my money fake. I knew my plan had to be subtle, a move so unexpected that he wouldn't see it coming. It had to be a total surprise. I couldn't just march into the bank and demand my money back. He had already discredited me. I needed an element of surprise, a way to deliver my message without him knowing. The idea came to me one sleepless night. It was so simple, so perfect. I wonder why I hadn't thought of it sooner. The bank, Mr. Thompson, the note. The plan began to solidify in my mind. The note would be my weapon. It would be my voice, my secret communication with the one person who could help me. I needed to make sure it was a message he couldn't ignore, a message that would bypass Michael's lies and get right to the heart of the matter. I began to craft the note in my mind, word by word, until it was perfect. It had to be short, to the point, and contain a code only Mr. Thompson would understand. It had to be a distress signal, a call for help from a person who was being held against her will. The next day, I made my move. I told Michael I needed to go to the bank to deposit a small inheritance check from an old friend. He, of course, insisted on coming with me. "Just to make sure you get there and back safely, Mom," he said, the words a bitter pill I had to swallow. I agreed, a feigned look of helplessness on my face. He bought it, hook, line, and sinker. He didn't know that I had already won. He was driving me right into my own trap, a trap he had helped me set. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where I would expose his lies and reclaim my life. But what he didn't know was that what I was about to do wouldn't just expose him, it would expose something much darker, a secret that would tear our family apart. The drive to the bank was a tense, silent affair. Michael was humming a little tune under his breath, a telltale sign of his smug satisfaction. He thought he had me exactly where he wanted me. I was a docile, compliant old woman doing exactly what he told me to do. He even held the car door open for me, a theatrical gesture of care. I just gave him a small, tight smile. I clutched my purse close to my chest. Inside, hidden deep within a small inner pocket, was the envelope. Not the check he thought I was depositing, but the note. It was a folded piece of stationery, unassuming and plain. But to me, it was a key, a sledgehammer, a grenade. It was my one shot at freedom. We walked into the bank, and Michael made a point of greeting everyone we passed, a jovial, charismatic man with his frail, confused mother in tow. He was playing the part to perfection. We approached Mr. Thompson's desk. "Mr. Thompson, thank you again for seeing us," Michael said, his voice full of warmth. Mr. Thompson stood up, his face still a careful mask of polite professionalism. He invited us into his office. Michael took a seat on the chair next to mine, a silent but clear message that I was not to be left alone. The office felt like a cage. My heart was pounding, a wild drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. "So, Mrs. Harrison, Michael said you have a check you'd like to deposit," Mr. Thompson said, his eyes on me. I nodded slowly. "Yes, a friend of mine passed away. This was his last wish." I reached into my purse, my hand trembling slightly, and pulled out the envelope. I held it in my hand for a moment. Michael, ever the control freak, instinctively reached for it. "Let me give that to him, Mom," he said, a patronizing smile on his face. He thought he was helping me, saving me from a mistake. But his reach was my opportunity. As he reached for the envelope, I moved my hand slightly, just enough to put the envelope directly into Mr. Thompson's hand. Our fingers brushed for a fleeting moment. It was my only chance. Michael didn't notice. He was too busy posturing, too busy explaining to Mr. Thompson that I was in a delicate state and that this check was just a small amount, but a good test of my new financial strategy. Mr. Thompson just looked at the envelope in his hand. He looked from me to Michael and back to me again. The note was hidden inside. He didn't open it right away. He just held it, his eyes meeting mine. And in that brief, silent exchange, I gave him a look. It wasn't a look of panic or despair. It was a look of pleading, a silent scream for help. He had to understand. He had to see through Michael's facade. My entire future depended on his understanding a single silent message. Michael, oblivious to the unspoken drama, just kept talking. He was so wrapped up in his own lie, he didn't see the truth right in front of him. But Mr. Thompson did. He slowly opened the envelope, and as he did, I held my breath. I felt a surge of hope, a desperate, frantic hope that this would work. As Mr. Thompson opened the envelope, I watched his face carefully. The professional mask of neutrality didn't drop all at once. It cracked. He pulled out the folded stationery, still plain and unassuming, and carefully unfolded it. His eyes scanned the few sentences I had written. Michael was still droning on about his financial plan and how they were just trying to protect me. He was so loud, so self-assured that he didn't notice the subtle changes happening right in front of him. Mr. Thompson's brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin, tight line. A flicker of something crossed his face, something that looked like disbelief. Then a terrible dawning horror. I knew then that he had understood. He placed the note face down on his desk, his hand covering it. He didn't say a word. He just sat there looking at Michael. The silence was deafening, a sudden jarring stop to Michael's endless monologue. Michael finally noticed the shift in the room's energy. His smile faltered. "Is everything all right, Mr. Thompson?" he asked, a hint of unease in his voice. Mr. Thompson didn't answer him. He just looked at me. Then he looked at Michael. He took a deep breath. "Michael, I think you should step out of the room for a moment. I need to speak to your mother alone." Michael's face went white. He opened his mouth to protest, to argue, but Mr. Thompson held up a hand. The gesture was small, but the authority behind it was absolute. "This is a private matter between Mrs. Harrison and the bank. I need you to wait outside." Michael was stunned. He was a man who was used to getting his way, to controlling every situation. This was the first time in a long time that someone had stood up to him. He sputtered something about me being unstable and not thinking clearly, but Mr. Thompson just pointed to the door. Michael, defeated and humiliated, slowly got up and left the office, casting a venomous glance at me as he went. The door clicked shut. I was finally alone with Mr. Thompson. The office was quiet. I was shaking, my body vibrating with a nervous energy that had been building for weeks. Mr. Thompson looked at me, his eyes full of a profound sadness. He slowly turned the note over and pushed it toward me. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, his voice quiet, "is this true?" The note read, "Mr. Thompson, please look at the serial numbers on my last 10 deposits. He is claiming my money is fake and that I am unstable. Please help me." Below the note, I had added one final devastating sentence that I had written in my notebook. "My son's debit card has been used for every large withdrawal from my account for the past month." Mr. Thompson had not only read my note, but he had taken a moment to quickly check my account records on his computer before I entered his office. He had seen the truth. The climax was here, and it was even better than I could have ever imagined. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of years of lies and manipulation. Mr. Thompson just looked at me, his face a complex mixture of apology and regret. "Mrs. Harrison, I am so sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Michael came in here weeks ago and he told me you were having a difficult time. He said you were a victim of a scam and that he was just trying to protect you. He painted a very convincing picture. I just nodded. I didn't need to say anything. He had seen the truth. My note, combined with the hard facts of my bank statements, was an unassailable mountain of evidence. He had looked at the withdrawals from my account, all of which had been made from Michael's debit card. He had seen the evidence of his betrayal with his own two eyes. I watched as the pieces fell into place for him. The fake money, the family lunch, the condescending phone calls. It wasn't about protecting me. It was about controlling my money and then stealing it. He was not just a concerned son. He was a thief. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger was still there, a low simmering fire in my belly, but it was now tempered by a cold, hard clarity. I was no longer afraid. Mr. Thompson picked up the phone on his desk and made a call. "I need security to the lobby," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. "We have an issue." I looked at the door where I knew Michael was waiting, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to come crashing down. He had been so sure of himself, so arrogant in his lies. He thought he was playing a game of chess, but he didn't realize I was playing a game of poker, and I had a royal flush. The security guards arrived a few moments later. They were two large, imposing men who stood on either side of the door. Mr. Thompson stood up and walked to the door, opened it, and beckoned Michael inside. Michael walked in, a smirk on his face, looking at me with a triumphant expression. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted me. But the look on his face changed when he saw the security guards. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice now a little shaky. Mr. Thompson didn't answer him. He just looked at me. "Mrs. Harrison, would you like to press charges?" he asked. Michael's eyes widened. "Charges? What is he talking about, Mom?" he demanded, his voice now laced with a frantic desperation. I looked at him, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt no fear. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my life from me, who had tried to convince everyone that I was losing my mind. I saw the fear in his eyes, the dawning realization that his carefully constructed lie had unraveled in a single, quiet moment. He had lost everything: his reputation, his freedom, and my trust. The climax was not a dramatic fight or a loud argument. It was a single question, a moment of profound clarity. I looked at him and said, "What did you think was going to happen, Michael? Did you think you could just take everything I have and get away with it?" He had no answer. He just stood there, speechless, his face a mask of shock. The silence was my victory.
The next hour was a whirlwind of legal talk and painful realities. Michael was escorted out of the bank by security, and later that day, the police arrived at my house. Michael and Jessica had been a team, a well-oiled machine of deceit and manipulation. But my single note and Mr. Thompson's trust had brought their whole operation to a grinding halt. My brother-in-law, a retired lawyer, offered to help me with the legalities. My sister called me, her voice full of a genuine shame I had not heard from her before. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "We had no idea." She had finally seen the truth. Not the lie Michael had been selling, but the lie he had been living. I was a survivor, not a victim. I spent the next few weeks trying to put my life back together. My friends started calling again, their voices full of apologies and explanations. I wasn't angry with them. Michael was an expert manipulator, a virtuoso of deceit. He had fooled them all, and in doing so, had exposed a deep-seated vulnerability in the way we trust people, even the people we love. I had to learn to live with the truth.
My own son, the boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice, had tried to steal from me. He had tried to take my dignity, my independence, my very self. But he had failed. He had underestimated me. He thought I was weak, but I was strong. My final victory wasn't in watching my son get arrested. It was in the small, quiet acts of defiance that followed. I went to the bank and closed my old accounts, opening a new one in a different bank. I changed the locks on my house. I got a new phone number. It was a painful, lonely process, but with each step, I felt a piece of my life, a piece of myself, coming back. Michael and Jessica eventually tried to contact me, but I didn't answer. I had nothing left to say to them. My family, now armed with the truth, were a constant source of support. My sister would call me every day, and my niece would come over to help me in the garden. They were a reminder that I was not alone, that I still had a family that loved and respected me, not for what I had, but for who I was. I went back to the market a few months later. I saw the young couple from that first day. They looked happy, and the young man's face was no longer pale with panic. He saw me, and a wide smile spread across his face. He came up to me and said, "Ma'am, I never got to thank you properly. You saved us that day. You don't know what a difference that $20 made." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. I said, "Just remember to pay it forward." He nodded, and as I walked away, I felt a sense of peace that was so much deeper than the one I had felt that first day. The $20 I had given away was just the start of a journey. The journey to reclaim my life. The journey to show my son and everyone else who had doubted me that I was not a victim. I was a survivor. And what they thought was my greatest weakness, my age and my kindness, was my greatest strength all along.